more you tighten your grip, Tuck, the more star systems will slip through your fingers.
She's the queen bee, a star. Those other two are just her little workers.
Her favorite movie is Varsity Blues.
I hear her hair is insured for $10,000.
I just feel like women, they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty.
But aren't you a damsel in distress?
I'm a damsel. I'm in distress. I can handle this. Have a nice day.
Too many guys think I'm a concept, or I complete them, or I'm gonna make them alive. I'm just a girl who's looking for my own peace of mind.
I don't think of men as people. I hope they are intimidated by me, yes.
Picture this. It is 1977, and you are going to go to the movies. There have been a lot of great movies coming out recently. It's been a good decade if you want to watch men going on harrowing adventures together, or if you prefer to watch men slipping into madness. And there are a few if you want to see the coolest man alive do masculine things. You could also see one of the best of all time, where the dramatic ending showcases how a man just has to shut out his wife sometimes. Or if you're feeling more antagonistic, you could see a few films where men did everything in their power to overcome evil and disgusting women. There's always plenty of movies to choose from where violence against women is the main plot. I'm, of course, cherry-picking my options here, but I would say it was a decade in which, generally speaking, the idea that women might go to the movies, or make them, was far less a considered possibility than them being used as a way for men to work through their issues. And I'm not saying any of these movies are bad, by the way. Most of them stand out as impressive works of art. What I'm saying, however, is that there is really just one movie made in the 70s that I still thoroughly enjoy more than 40 years later. And today, we're gonna talk about why that is. Anyway, hello! On this channel, we talk about ladies, and this series is going to be all about exploring the way female characters have been treated over the decades by this franchise. And I am well aware of how the Star Wars fandom can be.
You will never find the more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
So let me be clear, we are here to talk about Leia from the perspective of being someone who, when it was time to play Star Wars, had only one choice on who to be. And if you cannot understand that, then honey, this video is not for you. Feel free to click on the hundreds of thousands of other Star Wars videos made with you in mind.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along.
I don't know who you are or where you came from. From now on, you do as I tell you, okay?
For the rest of you, we're going to talk about how important Leia is to the story, her character arc, and the lasting impression she made. Let's get started. Now we're going to come back to the context of the 70s later, but for now, let's talk about how Leia as a person develops the galaxy as a whole. There are three main prongs to this story, which is brilliantly written to be embodied by our three main characters. We have our Force plot with Luke, we're introduced to the criminal underbelly through Han, and we get the bird's eye view of the galaxy mainly through Leia.
You are part of a rebel alliance and a traitor. Take it away.
And through our villains, of course, but she is the only one who actually speaks to any of them.
I recognized your foul stench when I was brought on board.
From a storytelling perspective that gives her a lot of influence, it moves her from the functional role of damsel in distress to be at least as important as her co-stars to the unfolding of the story. So let's pretend again that it is 1977, and you want to write a story about the Empire and Leia's struggle against it. But there's not yet dozens of canon materials to reference. So what do we know from the movie?
I only hope that when the data's analyzed, a weakness can be found.
For the galaxy, we learn that there is a Senate, and that Leia is on a mission from it. Holding her could cause the Senate to sympathize with the rebellion, which this guy at least thinks would be bad.
Holding her is dangerous. Word of this gets out, it could generate sympathy for the rebellion in the Senate.
We also learn that the Empire is evil, and what specifically that means.
It's not that I like the Empire, I hate it, but there's nothing I can do about it right now.
What I like about this is that, especially in science fiction, villains are often portrayed as bad just because of, their outfits. And then the heroes probably kill just as many folks as we see the villains killing, if not more. But here, the politics of what would make an evil empire is explored, and not only in dialogue. But to start with that,
Only you could be so bold. The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this.
Leia claims that only Vader would attack a diplomatic ship, and we see quickly that not only is he willing to fire on a diplomatic envoy, but he is prepared to cover up the situation and ensure no one comes looking for Leia.
Send a distress signal, and then inform the Senate that all aboard were killed.
It's a very underhanded approach that gives us immediate insight into how those working for the Empire abuse their power.
There'll be no one to stop us this time.
Which explains why the rebellion exists, and why we, the audience, would probably choose to side with them. We will get more into this in other episodes, but this movie includes several scenes to show us how this empire is evil, because it tramples on human rights. Human rights? Alien rights? Whatever. Tramples on rights, and our heroes, the rebellion, may be willing to engage in what are close to acts of terror, but they will not stoop to using the same tactics that the Empire uses to keep everyone in line.
Alderaan is peaceful. We have no weapons. You can't possibly...
another target, a military target? Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station.
So these scenes serve to establish how cold and calculating the Empire is, and their willingness to break space Geneva conventions. But we also get to see that Leia is cold and calculating herself, both with getting the plans off the ship at the beginning, and with how she deals with Tarkin's final attempt to learn the location of the rebel base. Up until this point, she has done everything she can to avoid giving her captors what they want. First, she fires on the stormtroopers, and if it hadn't been for their orders to stun,
There's one, set for stun.
she would have successfully completed her mission. Not that it was to be a martyr, necessarily, but I'm sure she has any number of secrets that she must do everything possible to protect, and getting killed in a firefight would be the easiest way to protect those. Then she is taken before Vader, and she antagonizes him considerably. We, of course, know all kinds of things about him later.
He said that
Anakin.
had an 8-pack
Anakin.
and was shredded.
But this movie shows him as a sort of extrajudicial boogeyman working for the Empire.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader.
He doesn't fit into the military hierarchy, which means he is dangerous, and will not be too concerned about political maneuvering that Tarkin, for example, would worry about.
Lord Vader will provide us with the location of the rebel fortress by the time this station is operational.
So her intentionally antagonizing him is not just because of her forceful personality,
Darth Vader. Only you could be so bold.
but also a tactic to get him to act rashly, to get rid of her instead of putting up with her antagonism. That doesn't work, and then she is tortured by this droid. I appreciate that we don't find out exactly what that means. That would put this movie in the category of other 70s movies, at least as far as needles are concerned. The implication is sufficient, and we know she resists.
Her resistance to the mind probe is considerable. It'll be some time before we can extract any information from her.
I do wonder why she doesn't say Dantooine now, but it's possible she doesn't think Vader would believe her to give up so easily. I would also say she is more concerned about what Vader will do. Giving that information to Tarkin, who generally plays politics, would be more reliable than giving it to the attack dog over here.
Governor Tarkin. I should have expected to find you holding Vader's leash.
Another reason for her hesitation in this scene might simply be that Dantooine is an inhabited planet, and just because the rebel base is no longer there doesn't mean she can offer it up in place of her home planet. That would also mean this behavior is not entirely a ruse. She is having a crisis of conscience. But as she said to Obi-Wan,
"This is our most desperate hour."
and then we see the full power of the Empire.
No.
If we were concerned about how citizens are treated before, obviously we have much more concern now.
As if millions of voices suddenly cried out in terror and were suddenly silenced.
Fortunately, our heroes have arrived.
You're who?
I'm here to rescue you. I've got your R2 unit. I'm here with Ben Kenobi.
Ben Kenobi, where is he?
Come on.
And we have the whole escape sequence where Leia takes charge and is a big part of how they are able to get off of the Death Star.
Somebody has to save our skins.
She demonstrates how good a judge of character she is almost right away with her rescuers, and could certainly be said to influence their actions during the climax.
Your friend is quite a mercenary. I wonder if he really cares about anything. I knew that was more to you than money.
She correctly identifies how they were able to escape at all and takes charge again when they get to the rebel base.
You must use the information in this R2 unit to help plan the attack. It's our only hope.
But I do wish she had a more active role while they were making the attack run instead of just looking concerned. Of course, there really aren't orders being given from the ground, so it could be worse. She's not really replaced.
23 degrees. I see it. Stay low.
And then, of course, we get this final ceremony where she finally gets a costume change and looks like a princess while she hands out medals. Overall, I would say a significant part of the world building is in Leia's hands, as well as the main plot of the film. Yes, Luke learning about the Force and about the past is important, and Han revealing how the regular folks are just surviving under this regime adds a great deal. But through Leia, we learn about what the stakes really are, and that is a wonderful role for our sole female character to have.
Only you could be so bold.
For our second section today, we're going to talk about Leia's heroine's journey. Now, if you check out my previous video on her, which I'm not really recommending because it's old, I do go through the whole journey in this film. However, for this series, I think it would be more intriguing to consider this as the first part of her story and approach it that way. As a result, here are the steps she takes into the wider world during this movie using Maureen Murdoch's heroine's journey, as always. The first step of the journey involves a separation from the feminine, something our heroine will need to embrace again before the end. When we first meet Leia, she has been, or is about to be, separated from basically everything. Her role in the Senate, her family, any allies at all.
You are part of the Rebel Alliance and a traitor. Take it away!
But for the purpose of this journey, I think the biggest thing she's been separated from is her feelings, her emotional center, her willingness to be vulnerable and trust people.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
You're who?
Sure, we see her emotions at a few points, but let's look at what chronologically is the first thing she does. She calls out to Obi-Wan as her only hope.
This is our most desperate hour. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
Compare that vulnerability to the rest of her scenes. Yes, she shows some fear from time to time, definitely anger. But here, for example, we know she's intentionally misleading her captors. So how much of this is genuine is up for debate.
They're on Dantooine.
Reached Dantooine. They found the remains of a rebel base, but they estimate that it has been deserted for some time.
She lied. She lied to us.
Of course, her being horrified is hardly a ruse, but here on the Death Star, she is separated from everyone important to her and has to separate from an important part of herself to keep functioning in the rebellion.
When we heard about Alderaan, we feared the worst.
We have no time for a SARS commander.
That is what will need to be resolved by the end of the trilogy.
He's got to follow his own path. No one can choose it for him.
The second step on the journey is to gain masculine allies. In general, these embody what the heroine has chosen to rely on instead of what she's separated from.
Can't get out that way.
Looks like you managed to cut up our only escape route.
Obviously, that would be Han, Luke, and Chewie. And let's not devalue Chewie here.
Will somebody get this big walking carpet out of my way?
He's an important part of the group.
We did it!
Anyway, in this movie and the next, they are instrumental in the following steps, but also in her own development as a character.
There wasn't anything you could have done.
She does start to trust them and even show some compassion as the adventure continues, but she is keeping them at arm's length.
What kept you?
We are running some old friends.
For now.
You think a princess and a guy like me?
No.
The Road of Trials is characterized by adventures that may not directly impact the heroine's personal journey, but do lead to something deeper later on. For Leia, that would be most of this movie. Escaping the Death Star, sharing the plans, getting ready for the attack, and observing how everything is going during the climactic battle. These adventures further develop her relationship with both Han and Luke, and Chewie. With Han, she accepts his mercenary nature with annoyance but not outright anger like Luke reacts, likely because she's known more people like him who may help the rebellion when it suits them but not otherwise, and because she certainly understands being pragmatic rather than emotional.
Your friend is quite a mercenary. I wonder if he really cares about anything. Or anybody.
I care.
With Luke, we have this moment of comfort. I know it has been pointed out by many people, including the princess herself, that she would be in much more need of comfort than he would.
Why do you have to comfort Luke when one guy dies, Ben Kenobi, but your whole planet has exploded?
That's right!
And no one's comforting you.
I'm still upset about that.
However, well, I can't say this experience is universal, but have you ever had just a really bad day? So bad that, like, you got through it fine, but if someone asked if you were okay and listened to you, you'd probably just burst into tears? I'm just saying, in Leia's shoes, I would also choose to comfort this nice fellow who's having a bad day, because if he did the same to me, I would probably lose it. And controlling her emotions is pretty essential to Leia's approach to the rebellion. Yes, even her anger. And I just feel like this is in character for her to strategize helping this guy, whom Obi-Wan brought here for hopefully a good reason, rather than deal with her own emotions right now.
We have no time for a SARS commander.
And also sets up something that her journey will need to resolve. The final step we're going to talk about for this movie is the illusion of success. Leia, of course, correctly identifies one illusion.
They let us go.
You're sure the homing beacon is secure aboard their ship?
She accepts the victory for what it is. They have the plans, and that is worth being followed.
It's not over yet.
More broadly, the climax of this movie represents the illusion of success for Leia. There are many things to celebrate. Luke uses the Force, the mercenary returns to their cause, they destroy the Death Star, Tarkin, our main villain, is dead, and they made a public response to the dissolution of the Senate that will be a strong message to their allies and enemies alike.
The rebellion will continue to gain a support in the Imperial Senate.
The Imperial Senate will no longer be of any concern to us.
But of course, that is not the end of the story, and their actions lead to the Empire, well, tightening its grip.
The more star systems will slip through your fingers.
But we'll get into all that next time. For now, there is something to celebrate before they continue the fight, but we know the success won't last. Alright, for our final section, let's talk about Leia from a metatextual perspective, and frankly, how she subverts your expectations.
It's a little short for a stormtrooper.
So first, let me say that one big reason I am creating this series is because of how the female characters in Star Wars movies seem to be, well, interpreted very differently by certain male audience members than how us ladies see them.
He said, I thought about you every day from when I was 12 to when I was 22.
In my experience, men love Leia.
And I said, every day? And he said, well, 4 times a day. Oh, what? See, you have that to look forward to.
Of the Star Wars ladies, she's their favorite. But they love the idea of her. They love this poster version, specifically. The goal to be reached, the damsel in need of rescuing, the woman they can impress. And they forget how angry she is and how much she would certainly call them out for any crap they might pull.
I take orders from just one person, me.
So wonder you're still alive.
They forget that she is a leader of the rebellion who undertook a far more dangerous mission than Luke did and sacrificed far more for the cause than most of the characters we ever see. Now, the Star Wars series, and especially the original trilogy, has a lot to say on the subject of masculinity. This movie asks, what kind of man is Luke going to become? Like his uncle? Like Obi-Wan? Like his father, either real or imagined?
He feared you might follow old Obi-Wan on some damn fool idealistic crusade like your father did.
Like Han, and so on. And Leia plays a part in that. She's rescuable and is nice to him, whereas she's not to Han. She encourages his good traits and celebrates his victories. But since I'm here talking to ladies, I'm sure we can all agree that that's nice, but not especially interesting to us.
I'm Luke Skywalker.
Who?
Even as a child, I did not care very much for Luke Skywalker. I did not dislike him, of course. I knew he was, the hero of the movie. But he was so plainly a character not designed with me in mind.
I don't dislike you. I nothing you.
Oh, thanks. That's special.
However, Leia, who may be inconvenienced by the Empire but is not a damsel, who may be wearing a pretty white dress but definitely is not always pristine with flowing blonde locks of a princess, who can shoot a blaster and stand up against the most feared men in the galaxy, who can mislead a man attuned to the Force and will sacrifice everything to ensure the rebellion continues.
At least the information in R2 is still intact.
Yeah, I could get excited about that.
I told you she would never consciously betray the rebellion.
Good for her.
And back to the context I started this video with. The 70s were not a great time for women in film or on set. I'm not going to defend the Hays Code, but removing it in the 60s led to a lot of experimentation and violence in film. And since men were, and still often are, the ones in charge of the industry, most of the stories ignored women at best and at worst villainized, victimized, or brutalized them.
And now, Your Highness, we will discuss the location of your hidden rebel base.
But then came Star Wars. It also differed from a lot of what was coming out because it had a much more optimistic tone. And if you look at movie releases, it set a pretty immediate precedent for movies being more hopeful and lighthearted than they were before.
We did it!
Star Wars was inspired by Flash Gordon, as most people know, and that had a few female characters, mainly Dale Arden, who started as a frequent damsel/love interest of Flash before becoming a scientist who was capable of dealing with situations on her own. This, of course, led to Leia, who, to quote George Lucas, I felt that I needed to have a woman in the script. The interesting thing is she does get in jeopardy, but she's very capable of taking care of herself. She is a central character, and I wanted a woman to be at the center of the story. I knew I didn't want to have 3 guys. It wouldn't have been nearly as interesting. She is a leader, and even though she gets captured, the guys are the ones who are fumbling around and being in trouble. I mean, they can't even rescue her.
This is some rescue.
And I just want to be clear on how much that decision made a significant difference in the reception of the film. Look at these fans lining up. Look who's lining up. Look at this woman who made an X-Wing pilot's costume in the days before you could have even looked up photos from the movie. Star Wars may have asked questions that men consider important, but it struck just as strong a chord with women, if not stronger, given how rare it was then, and frankly still is, to see a character as unabashedly both female and essential as Princess Leia.
Very few women could carry off the particular kind of strength that she had. I did not want to put boys' clothes on a woman. I wanted a woman who's a woman, who was very strong and wise and a leader.
Listen, I know Mark Hamill seems like a nice man, and Harrison Ford obviously has played the same character ever since, but it's Carrie's take on Leia that made this movie such a hit, that changed the direction of, if not all movies, then certainly genre fiction and blockbusters. We've seen boys grow up, leave the farm, and join the war plenty of times. We've seen cynical men turn out to have hearts of gold. These are good tropes. They're very enjoyable, but we see them all the time. But we had never seen a princess who kept her hair in this sensible style, who resisted her captors at every turn, and never acted like the villains had the upper hand. Importantly, Carrie also acted like a real person and not just a stoic warrior princess or a damsel in distress. Leia has depth. And when her rescuers showed up, she was the only reason they got out of there. She subverts any number of tropes, any that apply to her. And that is what made her so memorable and iconic. And that's what made the movie into the phenomenon it was. Because subverting expectations is what has always made Star Wars special.
You know, sometimes I amaze even myself.
That doesn't sound too hard.
Now I like to wrap these up by asking, is Leia more than a love interest? I know it's a little weird to discuss it now, just wait till we get to her next movie, but Leia is functionally in the role that the love interest for Luke would usually take. However, as I've said, she's far more than that here, to the point of barely having that role at all, fortunately.
He's my brother.
Leia is a strong female character in the realist sense. She may be able to shoot a blaster, sure, but she is brilliant, and the story is built around her rather than adding her as a MacGuffin like the damsel so often is. This is Leia's movie, and it made us all excited to see what she would do next.
Only you could be so bold. The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this.
Thank you for listening to me talk about our space princess. Next time, we'll continue the series by talking about a queen. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, buy me a coffee, all of those things so you don't miss it. See you then.